least 40 dolphins have died mysteriously in an area of Mauritius affected by an oil spill from a Japanese ship. Javin Sok Apadu from the Mauritius Fisheries Ministry said 38 carcasses had washed up on the beaches so far. Autopsy results on 25 dolphins that washed ashore on Wednesday and Thursday were expected in the coming days. According to preliminary autopsy results, veterinarians have so far examined only 2 of the dolphins, which bore signs of injury, but no trace of hydrocarbons in their bodies. The dolphins have been dying in an area affected by an oil spill caused when a Japanese ship, the MV Wakashio, struck a coral reef last month. Greenpeace has called on the Mauritius government to launch an urgent investigation to determine the cause of deaths and any ties to the Wakashio oil spill. However, there have been pockets of protests across the country over the endangered species. Joining me live to discuss this is the former President of Mauritius, Madam Ameenah Firdaus Gurib Fakim. Good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us on the Global Business Report. The first thing that I would like to ask you is if you are satisfied so far with the response of the Mauritius government to the oil spill.
I think before we go, whether we are happy with this, I think I would like to refer to what the Lloyd list has said. You know, the Lloyd list is a 300-year-old document, and they have been handling the Wakashio on the industry, and they have said, and I will cite, it's an own goal for shipping. And I will quote even more, it's the best public relations response that can rustle up when angry mainstream media and an even angrier populace is scholastic reiteration of the arcana of liability conventions. We are very, very unhappy here for many reasons, and I think the world has seen what happened last Saturday on the streets of Port Louis when people just descended on the streets to ask for questions from the government. I mean, the march was tinted with other issues as well, but I think what broke the camel's back was precisely seeing these whales and dolphins washing up our shores. And this washing up of these whales and dead dolphins came immediately after the company, and also in collaboration with the Mauritian authorities, decided to sink part of that ship. And this what triggered the death of so many of these species, animals, that have washed up our arms. Of course, there has been popular anger around this decision, so people are asking for questions.
Speaking of those questions, the amount of oil that's been spilled in the lagoon so far, we don't have details on the volumes. Doesn't the public deserve to know that?
We don't know how much oil has been spilled. We don't know the impact of this oil on the marine life and on our life as humans. And I think it's only fair that the Mauritian public gets some answers. And we are demanding answers now because we have not been at all happy with the way that this whole disaster has been handled so far.
Thank you for that. Japanese media was recently reporting that there was some talks between the Mauritius government and Japan on compensation to the tune of, I believe it was $34 million, which was supposed to be used in either purchasing ships or something to that, fishing ships to that order. What do you make of that? Is that enough, compensation in your view? What else should be discussed as far as compensation is concerned?
We were very shocked when we heard that because we didn't know any of that until the media, especially the international media, started talking about it, and local media has picked this up as well. Now, this cleaning operation, I must also point out, first of all, that this company, Mitsui Oeska Shipping Line, they have been recording billions of dollars of profit. And we are talking about the operation, the cleaning operation, which already in itself will cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, how can we accept compensation for something like $34 million? I mean, this is just unbelievable. And I think Nigeria is very familiar to oil spills after what happens in the Niger Delta. So they know the mess that this causes, but beyond this is also liability to our health, liability to the pristine marine environment where this spill has taken place. And for those people in Nigeria who may not know that the oil spill has taken place next to our marine park, where unique species of flora and fauna are found, and they're found there and nowhere else on the planet. So how can you accept this paltry amount in terms of compensation for damage, which was reversing years, over 35 years of conservation effort. To all this has been done. I mean, this is unacceptable by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you. I was about to ask you about the environmental impact, and you've already provided some answers there. So what else? What other kind of damage can we see? Environmental impact is also a damage to tourism with regards to visitors to your marine park, and as well as I guess the species dying off and so on and so forth. What other environmental impacts can we be seeing from what's happening here?
For Mauritius, the tourism industry brings about 24% of our economy. Almost 1/4 of our economy depends on tourism. And we are now faced with a scenario where we already have had, for this year, the tourism sector has been completely wiped off with the COVID, and now we have the Wakashio. Granted that it has touched on about 5 to 10% of our beaches. But the impact is going to be much more long-term because, as I said, we don't know what the impact of this oil is going to have on the long term, on the livelihoods of so many people. But more importantly, they have killed dolphins and whales, and these were our friends. They were friends to the fishermen because they were having boats where they could go and watch dolphin swimming. Tourists could swim with the dolphins in our clean, pristine waters. And now what we're seeing is these animals washing off the beaches dead. And the autopsy done so far have not given us much. And, we were very surprised when we saw a communique coming out from certain ministries telling us that they have died from natural causes. Well, come on. Now in the age of the digital age, where we get information not from the local media, from outside, we get something like this. Oh, come on, this is not serious.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. Now, okay, this it kind of looked like a freak accident with the ship, I guess, striking a coral reef. How do we prevent this from happening again? What do you think? I mean, even though it looked like a freak accident, in your view, how do you think this can be prevented in the future?
Well, the Wakashio wreck is not a God's act. It's been man-made. And the satellites provide evidence that this ship has been moving almost in a straight line for many hours before it hit our reef, right? It was moving at a speed of around 10 to 11 knots. This is very fast for a ship of that size. It's among the 1% in terms of the largest ships being constructed in this world, and it tantamount to an aircraft carrier. So it's a huge ship carrying, I don't know, we still don't know how much oil it was carrying, hitting our reef. Now, it is being said increasingly that they were asking for this innocent passage going through our waters. Here we have a small country, a small island nation with limited resources. How can we compete? How can we even sit down on a negotiating table with a powerful industry, with a shipping industry? We don't have the means. We don't have the capacity. I think what we have to do increasingly, and this is what we're going to have to do at the international level, is to lobby so that the lanes are regulated, because they cannot just go anywhere. And once they go off that lane, they will be called to order.
Thank you for that, ma'am. What about, since it was carrying oil, what about the conversation regarding the global shift away from oil to renewable energy? Perhaps if we're at a more developed level with that conversation, does that prevent this from happening in the future?
Well, it doesn't prevent this from happening, but I think right now it's going to be a pipe dream to say that we're going to get away from fossil oil immediately. But what we can ask is that the ships carrying this oil, or this dirty oil as I call it, they get carried in double-hulled vessel. And this is where we actually asked the IMO to regulate this. But more importantly, the country where that ship was registered, Panama. And it would appear that this Wakashio has never even been to Panama, not even once in his 13 years lifetime. So what is the role of these regulators? What is the role of these flags of convenience? We're asking questions and we want answers.
Certainly. I also want to ask you about the cleanup efforts so far with regards to the talks that have been had, and at what stage are we with the cleanup efforts, and are you satisfied with where they are right now as far as cleaning up the spill?
It's been almost 40 days since we had the spill. We haven't had one single communique from the local authorities, or we have heard that Japanese experts have been coming, but we haven't had one single press conference between the Japanese experts and our local officials to tell us where we are. We don't know whether the cleanup has officially started. All we saw were these Mauritians with straws and I don't know material. They were trying to make this boom to prevent the oil coming very near the shore. So we're still very much in deep waters here. Sorry, excuse the pun, but we don't know. And we don't know when the proper cleanup operation will start. But one thing we know, it's going to be very, very costly. And I do not see why the Mauritian taxpayers have to pay for that.
Thank you for that. And I guess the pun is appreciated. It's understood too. Any chance of legal action?
Well, we have to get our own, institutions in place. We need to get the right communique. We need to do the right assessment. And all I can say up front is that the proper assessment has not even started because we haven't had independent science underpinning these activities. So we need to start with that. And already we've lost 1 month. So we need to start getting our house in order before we start making claims internationally. But I think morally, and I think the Pope has rightly said, the companies that have been involved in the spilling, in the soiling of our seas, they have a moral obligation to start cleaning up.
Thank you for that. You said earlier that, Mauritius being a small island nation, you're dealing with a big corporation here that's been making billions of dollars based on their operations. Does that make getting justice for this difficult?
I'm confident that in the digital age in which we're operating, we're going to ensure that they get the message. And it's easy now, the click of a button, at the click of a mouse, we can get the messaging out. So we are counting on this because what we are seeing some worrying headlines as well in some international papers, in some international journals, that some people are even saying that this is not an oil spill. I mean, is it because they want to do away and kind of, push it under the carpet that they'll get away with minimum payment? I mean, this is the question we're going to be asking, but we're going to make sure that they don't get away with that.
Speaking of getting away with it, when there, I believe it was Lebanon, there was the explosion that happened there. The international response was huge. What's your take on the international response to what's gone on here? Are you happy with what you've seen so far, at the attention that this has brought? Are you satisfied with the international response?
Well, international response is one thing, but I think what we're counting on is much more international support. And I think the support has been put forward. I think it's getting blocked somewhere. I don't know why it's not happening, but the international support must come and we would like to welcome them, of course, under the appropriate, appropriate conditions, because we need to have science underpinning. And I think we call for American scientists, British are the best institutions who can come and give us a hand. But of course, provided the local authorities here do the needful and make sure that these people come, because we need independent science. But so far, the international media has has actually showed what has happened here, but it's not enough. We need to sustain and to maintain that pressure because we want answers, and more importantly, we want reparation.
Certainly. I can't let you go without asking. Mauritius has always had high rankings with regards to ease of doing business, very attractive for investment. You've got your, boisterous tourism sector. What's the secret? What have you done well?
I think for a long time, all the founding fathers, when we got independence, we have, maintained a governance issue. We've had elections every 5 years, so we ask questions and we ask accountability as well from our leaders. And they know they have a 5-year mandate, so they have to do good. But more importantly, whatever we speak about the Mauritian miracle, there has not been any Mauritian miracle. There has been straight strategic decisions taken within the best conditions that we've had, and this has accounted for what increasingly the world is referring to as the Mauritian miracle. But there is no miracle. A strategic decision based on our human capital, because we have no resources, but now even our resource, which we consider to be the future of this continent, of this country rather, it has been tampered with, and it's been dirtied for us. So this is not acceptable, because for us, we consider ourselves to be an ocean economy, an ocean state. And this is what we'll have to grapple with in the future.
Madam Ameenah Gurib Fakim, thank you so much for joining us, former President of Mauritius. One of my favorite quotes from you on climate change is "Science raises societies." I believe is what you said. I really like that quote. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking to the Global Business Report on Arise News. Appreciate your insights.